Imagine waking up in a hospital bed with amnesia, and you haven't the foggiest clue who you are. You try to recall your most recent memories, how you may have gotten there, but you can't seem to remember. And after a few seconds, you come to realize that you truly have no idea who you are. And just then, a group of men enter the room and deliver the most shocking news. They tell you that you're the leader of the country, and that once you're feeling better, there are some important issues for you to deal with. How would you feel? You'd probably hold your head up pretty high, realizing that you're someone important. But what if instead of addressing you as a world leader, those same people informed you that you're the hospital janitor? And instead of awaiting your return to the Oval Office, they're awaiting your return to the bathrooms on the second floor. How would you feel then? What would you think of yourself? Well, the central question in the story of Noach is, why did Hashem specifically choose to destroy the world through a flood? Hashem could have chosen any form of destruction, and yet he chose water. Why? In Judaism, water is often associated with the mitzvah of mikvah, the requirement to immerse oneself in a natural water bath in order to cleanse oneself of spiritual impurity. So what's the meaning behind this strange action? Washing oneself with water removes physical filth, but how does it affect one's spiritual state? So in order to understand both the Mabul and the unique power of mikvah, and to maybe understand the concept of identity, we have to understand the spiritual concept of water. The Maharal explains that the fundamental nature of water lies in the fact that it's formless. Water has no independent form of its own. It adopts the shape of its container. The ocean is completely formless, and unlike dry land, it has no pathways or landmarks. And this attribute of water reflects its essence. Water represents the initial stage in every creative process, because before something becomes expressed and takes on form, it exists in a formless, amorphous state. And through the creative process, physical form emerges from this intangible, formless root. And this is why the Torah states that during the creation of the world itself, there was initially only water, and only afterwards did dry land emerge from the water. And this is this deep secret behind the Mabul. Hashem wasn't destroying the world with the flood, he was recreating it. The Dor HaMabul, the generation of the flood, became so corrupted that Hashem decided to start over with Noach alone. Hashem therefore immersed the world in water so that it could return to its primordial state of formlessness and void, and only once it reverted back to its original state could the dry land once again emerge from the waters, recreated and reformed. And only once the dry land emerged and the world was birthed once more could Noach then leave the Teva, the ark. And this deep nature and purpose of water also explains why we are surrounded by amniotic fluids while we're in the womb. Just as during creation the physical world emerged from formless water, each of us has our own creation story. And therefore we each emerge from our own waters. Our birth is like the birth of a new world. And a further example of water's unique spiritual purpose is apparent in the events of Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. The Maharal explains that Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, was the creation and birth of the Jewish people. And therefore, just as the creation and recreation of the world emerged from water, and just like each of us emerged from our own waters when we were born, the Jewish people had to be born from water as well. They therefore entered the water and emerged reborn. In essence, the splitting of the Yam Suf was like a pregnant woman's water breaking. They entered as individuals, but emerged reborn as a nation. The entire world, the Jewish nation, and each individual person has a creation story of emerging from formless water into concrete existence. So having shown that water serves as the means of recreation, we can now understand the unique mitzvah of entering into the waters of a mikvah. When we immerse ourselves in the waters of a mikvah, we return to a pure, formless state, the original state of perfection that we possessed while in the womb. By returning to our root and reconnecting to our higher selves, we wash away our spiritual impurity. When we emerge reborn. It's as if we had been recreated, taking on form and shape for the first time. The process of emerging from the mikvah is comparable to the dry land emerging from the primordial waters. And this sheds light onto the unique circumstances that require immersion in a mikvah. For example, a Jewish convert, a ger, immerses in the waters of a mikvah as the final step in the conversion process. And this is because a Jewish convert is considered to be born anew. Ger kekatan sheno adam. the convert immerses in the waters of the mikvah, the medium of recreation, and emerges reborn. He or she entered as an old version of him or herself, but emerges anew, reborn, ready for a new way of life. And with this background, we can understand the prevalence of the number 40 in the story of the Mabul, as well as in relation to the waters of the mikvah. The floods of the Mabul lasted 40 days. Now, kosher mikvah requires 40 sela of water, which is a biblical type of measurement. Chazal state that until 40 days after conception, the fetus is considered maya ba'alma, formless and like water. So what's the meaning behind these different features of 40, and what's the connection between them and water? Well, the number 40 represents the spiritual concept of form, the point at which something formless takes on concrete form, and this is apparent throughout Tanakh and Halacha. The Mabul lasted 40 days and nights because this was the amount of time it took for the world to transition from formlessness to its recreated form. A mikvah requires 40 sa because this is the amount of water required for a person to transition from formlessness to a newly created form, a reborn self. And until 40 days, the fetus has no form at all. Only after 40 days does the fetus begin to take on concrete form. Moshe spent 40 days and nights on Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, while receiving the Torah, which was a reformation of reality itself. The Jewish people spent 40 years in the Midbar, in the desert, as they went through the process of recreating their identity and preparing themselves to enter Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Chazal state that 40 is the age of Bina, of understanding, because knowledge is the attainment of formless facts and details, but understanding is the ability to source all expressed details and facts back to their root principles and concepts, giving meaning and form to the countless scattered facts. And this brings us right back to our introductory story. Every day we get to choose who we are, what we believe, and how we're going to live our lives. Each morning we get to create our identity. We're never stuck in the patterns of our past. Each day we begin anew. As Avraham, who makes his first appearance at the end of Parshat Noach, said, Anochi afar ve'efer, I am but dust and ashes. And while this is generally understood as a statement of extreme humility, there's a fundamentally deeper explanation of the statement as well. Ashes represent an elemental breakdown, the most basic particles of an object. Dirt is the starting point of growth. It's the place where seeds are planted and given life. In a deeper sense, Avram was saying that every day he would ash himself, breaking his very self down into his elemental root form, and he would then plant himself anew. In other words, Avram would recreate himself every single day. Each and every day he looked deep within himself, examined and broke down every aspect of his self, and then recreated himself for the better, taking the next step in his spiritual growth. Avraham never continued living the same way simply because it was comfortable or because he was used to it. Avraham challenged himself daily, constantly pushing himself to become the very best he could be. May we all be inspired to embark on a genuine journey of Afar Ve'efer, finding excitement and meaning in our constant growth and internal recreation.